Good day, my name is Graham. I'm just a thick Yorkshireman living down under here in Australia. It's a very sunny, beautiful day here today. It's not so bright in Britain, where people are freezing to death because of the mean-spiritedness of the government and the mean-spiritedness of corporations, and just basically the lack of Christian charity within the democratic system these days. That is not improving lives, it's making lives worse and worse, because of extremely, what I call, bad math economic systems. That is maths, an economic system that accumulates a debt to the people, and a deficit in fact that the social deficit is when people can't afford heating and adequate food and adequate rent, because the rents are so high and the heating bills are so high. That is the basic common capital of everyone that should be taken care of first, so that people can afford then the food and the shoes and the clothes and to enjoy themselves to some relative degree, as in any civilized and socially country that has a social immunity, like Britain really has. Britain's a great place to be, and we'd ought to keep it that way, but it's destroying it by all this left-right nonsense, which is basically a court against the people in the last 20 years or so. Now, there needs to be a remedy to this, and Jacob Mogreis, who I take my hat off to, he is now talking about something that Paul Keating suggested, the Prime Minister, the only Prime Minister in Australia we've had that's had 2 ounces of common sense and intelligence, and that's Paul Keating. All the rest have just been sneaky people. That's all they have been, regardless how they're portrayed. They've just been sneaky people, or clever at pretending to Australians they're doing something for them when actually they're removing capital for them. That's what they've been doing. But what Paul Keating said was there should be a sliding scale economy, and I've been working on that idea for a number of years. Now, what does it mean to sliding scale economy? Well, Jacob Mogreis has somehow coincidentally come up with a similar idea, that people on lower incomes ought to have their the tariffs, if you like, or whatever they are, on food, clothing and stuff like that, reduced, so they can have immunity and they have the ability to afford that, and that also stimulates the economy. What we need in society is a more cooperative medium, if you like, between the corporations and the society itself. It's alright, corporations need to make profit, but when that profit takes away from the ability of pensioners to stay warm in winter, well, you're sacrificing old people who've already maybe worked all their life and worked hard for these corporations in the past. You're sacrificing them for profits of CEOs and managers and the bankers, which is unchristian for a start, and surely it's not British. Whatever British is, it can't be something to be proud of if they're freezing old people and the poor people in winter because of heating bills, as they're doing in Australia as well, because we're saving the climate here, which we won't go into the nonsense that is within Australia. The context of Australia is absolute nonsense. It's just an excuse for corporations to enrich themselves and sacrifice the less well off, and that's what this most of it's all about. That's what the corporate political system, which we're into, the era of the corporate political system, or the political system ruled by the corporate sector, that's the era we're into, and that's why it's getting harder and harder and harder for the poor people to be able to afford the rents and electricity and the basic food and amenities, so they can have a reasonable life. Now, what is wealth? You could say, what is wealth? Well, wealth seems to be, to some people, if you've got a Rolls Royce and a big mansion in Chelsea or a big mansion in the country, that's wealth. But wealth is just, if the better off society is as a whole, the wealthier the whole society is. So my suggestion with sliding scale economics is, if we identify what static capital is, and electricity is a static capital, a common capital, everyone has in common the ubiquitous need for electricity to maintain a reasonable lifestyle is common to all people, and that charge and that alone should be a minimum for people on low incomes and it should be scaled up to those on the higher incomes to a point that people can't abuse it. But then it means at least they can keep warm in winter in England and cool in summer in Australia without being scared of getting the bill and not being able to afford the rents and stuff like that, which creates then more and more homelessness. And it's odd that the governments in our Western countries are creating more and more homelessness by this means, that's very, very means, at the same time bringing more migrants into our country. It looks like they're trying to get rid of the people in the residents of the country out of their homes by killing old people off and by getting people to not be able to pay their rents so they can make room for immigrants that are coming in. That's what it seems to be, to call me cynical. But any charges that you can say are a common, anything that's a common should be on a sliding scale, and this is the revolution we need to have, the evolution in capitalist socialist economics. If you look at the need to make capital is within everyone's obligation, and the need to look after the social contract, if you like, the society itself, that not everyone is able to make capital or join in and be employed. So you need to have a balance, but you need to make capitalism very, very important. I'm all for capitalism, but at the same time not into it where it's 13th century and you end up causing a massive amount of poverty and suffering because a few CEOs and bankers have lost their soul, have sold their soul to some financial devil, and that's what seems to have happened. But if you can identify, and we can identify as they call static capital, the need to look after health system, the need to look after schools and things like this, need a model, an evolutionary model, an equation and a formula that makes sure this funding grows for this, that the growth in need is natural and added to with immigration. Therefore the governments must become responsible once again towards the growth in need by accounting for it in every time they do their annual budgetary, and they must develop a system over a period of time that allows a country and its people to live more harmoniously within itself. At the same time, it's creating a wealthier country by eliminating a fair bit of what is called the cause of poverty at the same time. Now, we know for certain that we're going to go to a period where AI and robots replace humans in many jobs. And my suggestion is the reverse of what everyone fears, and you're not going to stop corporations employing robots for doing many of their jobs because they're into profit, but nonetheless we can replace a lot of administration, which is extremely costly, by AI. And that, to me, I'm not talking immediately, I'm talking over a 22-year period or 21-year period to 2040. I'm talking about we go through a sliding, gradual, remedial change to a 22-hour week for most of the people in the lower echelons, at least, so that then can live on a 22-hour week but employ more and more people by various means. It doesn't know if they're growing food for old people, growing food for hospitals, or growing food for schools or stuff like that, but employing people. Because the most important, talk about equality and wealth. What does it mean? It can mean anything you like it to mean. But the greatest accumulator of wealth is the civil behaviour, the moral and civil behaviour of all people, no matter how wealthy they are. The more morally principled the poor people are, obviously the wealthier they are. The most common factor causing poverty and hardship and poor education in the society are poor parenting. Irresponsible poor parenting is the greatest cause of societal decay and the greatest cause of people failing at school, failing in education because they haven't been set the example. Unless you have that, it's no good blaming the rich and the politics and everyone else for your failure if you're failed as a parent, because we have to be directly honest to actually progress society in a positive and pragmatic manner. Don't have to be a Christian or a Muslim or anything, to have a strict moral principle. You can go to China and observe how they live. They've got reasonable moral principles, and therefore the parents set good examples to their children, and therefore that society is actually progressing right now. Regardless of anything negative we hear about it, it's actually progressing. One of the few places in the world that's actually progressing in that sense, because it has a moral principle within its society itself. That, to me, the obligation to behave in certain ways by all people, no matter what colour you are, what creed you are, whatever you are, is then the basis of building a wealthier, happier, more enjoyable future for all people, regardless their station in life. But there, you know, a little bit of an outline how we go through to the future, so that it turns out a better future than what is got where we're heading at the moment, because of the corporate financial sector attacking society and sacrificing society and pretending it's saving the climate and pretending it's being into equal rights and pretending, just all pretense. Mostly what the liberals and left and whatever the socialists are all pretense. They cannot back up any of their arguments with logic or rationale or science. They can't. They just have never done that. And they decry and shout down anyone who dare question their irrationality. My name's Graham, and I love my country of UK as much as I ever did. Brexit, people voted for Brexit and the government, and everyone ought to respect that. Otherwise, there's something really wrong there.